if we'll only avoid any confrontation with the enemy, he'll forget his evil ways and learn to love us.
What is up, you guys? I'm Jeff, and this is SPI, where we talk about the paranormal and the supernatural, and no, those two things are not the same thing. Recently in the news, the Pope has talked about allowing married men to become priests. He said, "We must consider if viri probati is a possibility." Well, viri probati means tested men and refers to married men who's been shown to have good character, or just men who's shown to have good character. Pope Francis said this because of the shortage of Catholic priests in small communities. This just highlights the Catholic Church's compromise to culture, because if you believe that a priest should not be married because of what the Bible teaches, then whether there's a small community or not, that should not affect that teaching. Now, I'm not Catholic, so I don't believe that, but I don't believe that, I just want to point out where it's highlighting the Catholics' compromise to culture. With that being said, I wanted to talk about the Pope, the Catholic Church, and their connection to the book of Revelation, because that ties in directly with their compromise to culture. Let's go ahead and get started with the video. Revelations chapter 17, verses 1 through 2 says, "One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, 'Come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits on many waters. With her the kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries.'" In this video, I want to propose to you that the prostitute is the Catholic Church in Rome, and today we'll be going over specific biblical evidence that shows you why it is the church. Let's look at many waters on which the prostitute sits. What are the many waters? If you go further in the chapter to verse 15, the Bible actually tells you what the many waters are. Revelation chapter 17, verse 15 says, "Then the angel said to me, 'The waters you saw, where the prostitute sits, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages.'" That being said, we can already tell that the prostitute is not a literal prostitute. It's not one woman who's committing adultery with all kinds of kings all over the earth and sitting on a bunch of people. That doesn't make any sense. This is obviously symbolic terms, but it does tell you clearly what those symbolic terms mean. That being said, what is the prostitute? Let's look into that. The Bible refers to the church as a woman, a virgin bride to Christ. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 2 says, "I am jealous for you with a godly jealousy." This is Paul speaking. "I promised you to one husband, to Christ, so that you might present yourself as a pure virgin to him." Notice there, one husband. She's not committing adultery. The church is not committing adultery. And the church is referred to as a pure virgin with no one else. When the nation of Israel backslid against God and worshipped other gods, God would refer to Israel, God's people, as adulterers and unfaithful. Let's look at this. Hosea chapter 1 verse 2 reads, "When the Lord began to speak through Hosea, the Lord said to him, 'Go, marry a promiscuous woman, and have children with her, for like an adulterous wife, this land is guilty of unfaithfulness to the Lord.'" In some version of this verse, the word promiscuous actually reads harlot or prostitute. So we can see here that God uses the terms harlot and adulteress or adultery to refer to people who are supposed to be His, but worship other gods or make other things their God. But you might ask, why would God ask Hosea to marry a promiscuous woman, a harlot? Well, in the Old Testament, God would have prophets do physical things that represented what the nation was doing and how He would respond to the nations. Today, Christians do that by picking up their cross and carrying the burdens that the world gives them, just like Christ picked up His cross and carried the burdens of all of us. But here in Hosea chapter 1 verse 2, we have God having Hosea marry a promiscuous woman who would later commit adultery on him, because it represents God going into a covenant relationship with Israel, who would commit adultery on him by worshiping other gods. A few chapters later, God has Hosea still try to be with his wife after she's committed adultery. This illustrates the love that God has for Israel, even though they've committed adultery for him and on him. This also illustrates the pain and the damage that Israel caused by cheating. Anybody who's been cheated on can attest to how much love and care it takes to forgive somebody after they've done that and to still go for them. Let's read Hosea chapter 3, verse 1, the NLT version, because I like how it illustrates it, how it portrays it. Then the Lord said to me, "Go, love your wife again, even though she commits adultery with another lover." This will illustrate that the Lord still loves Israel, even though the people have turned to other gods and love to worship them. But this just shows again that the Bible refers to people who are supposed to be God's people, but worship other gods besides worshiping Him alone. He refers to them as adulterers, as a woman who is an adulterous wife. Now, I'm not saying that they are, but the Catholic Church has set itself up and its constituents as God's people. But you're going to see that the Catholic Church accepts more and more other religions and just other beliefs in general, whether you have no beliefs at all or you're a Muslim. Speaking of Muslim, let's look at the Catechism, specifically Catechism 841. The Catechism is official beliefs of the Catholic Church. Catechism 841 reads, "The Church's relationship with the Muslims. The plan of salvation also includes those who acknowledge the Creator. In the first place, among whom are the Muslims. These profess to hold the faith of Abraham, and together with us, they adore the one merciful God, mankind's judge, on the last day." Now, Pope Francis has actually used this catechism, Catechism 841, to get Christians to be more accepting of the Muslim faith, or anyways, of the Muslim people in general. Which it's good to be kind to Muslim people, but we do not accept their faith as valid, and we don't even hint to their faith as being valid. That would be wrong on a Christian's part. But moving on, I want to show you a few other verses that will illustrate that the prostitute is a church. And in my next videos, I'll be showing you how the prostitute is a church in Rome, the Catholic Church in Rome. If we look at Revelation chapter 1 verse 20, Jesus clearly states that the 7 candlesticks which thou sawest are the 7 churches. Now remember that, because we're going to go to another verse that talks about the prostitute. By the way, the prostitute is also called Babylon in chapter 17, and in chapter 18, and in chapter 16 actually. So let's go to Revelation chapter 18 verses 23. It reads, "And the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee, and the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived." Now this is talking about the church in Rome. There won't be a church in Rome anymore. The candle is obviously the church. Jesus said so in Revelation chapter 1 verse 20. Now, the light is the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride. So, in other words, they will not be talking about the things of the church or the things of Christ any longer, because God's judgment is going to come down on them. So now we know that the prostitute is a church. Next week, I'm going to be showing you that the prostitute is the Catholic Church in Rome. So stay tuned for that. And if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and please subscribe.